Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most bizarre, explosive, and honestly fascinating digital phenomenons in recent political history. We're going to look at how a simple, seemingly offhand biological insult completely backfired and sparked a massive countermovement. By the end of this, you're going to understand exactly how internet culture, mixed with some deeply ancient Jungian psychology, can basically weaponize a meme to challenge an entire establishment. Let's get right into it. 15 million. Just take a second to wrap your head around that number. In May of 2026, it took just a matter of days, literally days, for a brand new, completely satirical political party to gain 15 million followers online. To put that into perspective for you, that absurdly rapid growth blew right past the official digital presence of India's long-established ruling party. It spread like wildfire.
Okay, let's dive into this central mystery, right? Why on earth are millions of young, educated people proudly embracing the identity of what is arguably the most universally despised insect on the planet? How did the Cockroach Janta Party, or the CJP, manage to turn an unwanted gross pest into an absolute badge of honor?
So here is our roadmap for today. 1. The rise of the swarm. 2. Projecting the state's shadow. 3. The cockroach archetype awakens. 4. Achieving symbolic convergence. And 5. Defending the secular constitution. Section 1. The rise of the swarm. All right, so the historical spark for this whole phenomenon actually happened right inside the Supreme Court of India. During an open hearing, the Chief Justice characterized some young citizens who had basically turned to social media activism because they couldn't find employment as parasites and cockroaches. Now, it's worth noting the Chief Justice did later clarify that his remarks were referring to people with fraudulent degrees and weren't meant to insult the youth of the nation as a whole. But as you can imagine, the semantic damage was already done. The quote hit the internet and just went incredibly viral. And to understand why that specific quote struck such a massive nerve, we really have to look at the undeniable structural realities driving this frustration. According to research from Azim Premji University and data published in Nature, the graduate unemployment rate in India sits at a staggering 40%. Think about that. And only a tiny fraction, 7%, actually transition into permanent salaried work within a year. Because of this, the anxiety rate among unemployed youth is nearly 62%. These severe economic realities created a massive powder keg of frustration. That insult from the government official, that was just the match. Section 2. Projecting the state's shadow. So, to unpack the why of this, we're going to lean into a Jungian perspective. It all starts with Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious. Jung essentially believed that beneath our own personal, individual memories lies this deeper, shared mental landscape. It's filled with archetypes, these primordial images and symbols from our evolutionary past that unconsciously steer how we behave and react. Yes, even in modern politics. And lurking right there within this collective unconscious is what Jung called the shadow. The shadow represents the hidden, repressed, unacknowledged parts of a personality, or in this case, an entire state. Impartially speaking, academic sources and critics point out that the ruling Hindi nationalist government's public image is heavily built on ideals of cultural purity and rapid economic prosperity. But the repressed realities, the jobless growth, the extreme inequality, and what the movement describes as constitution-denying, anti-secular policies create this massive shadow. So rather than confront those systemic failures, the state projects its shadow onto the marginalized, unemployed youth, literally labeling them as parasites or cockroaches. Section 3. The cockroach archetype awakens. Now, this is where it gets absolutely fascinating. In depth psychology, the cockroach is far more than just a disgusting bug you want to step on. It's actually a deeply Plutonian ancient archetype of survival. It represents this indestructible vitality that thrives in the dark, survives total cataclysms, and simply cannot be controlled. For the oppressed and deprived youth, the cockroach suddenly became the unifying symbol they desperately needed, something that was previously missing. By accepting that label, they tapped right into this primal transformative power. The power dynamic instantly flipped on its head. Instead of cowering from the state's projection of them as pests that needed to be exterminated, the youth reappropriated that exact identity. They became resilient, autonomous survivors, navigating hostile architecture. They completely stripped the shame away from the insult. Instead of trying to prove their worth within a system that honestly had no jobs for them anyway, they just embraced the shadow identity entirely. It's a brilliant psychological judo move. Section 4. Achieving symbolic convergence. We can really understand how this mobilized millions of people by looking at Ernest Borman's Symbolic Convergence Theory. This theory basically explains how sharing creative interpretations of events allows a totally disconnected group of individuals to build a cohesive, shared consciousness. You see, for years, these massive groups of unemployed youth were completely isolated. They weren't connected due to a total lack of symbolic convergence. But suddenly, this unifying symbol, mediated by the image of the cockroach, acted like a giant magnet, pulling all these atomized people together. Prior to this moment, unemployed youth were incredibly fragmented, separated by caste, by geography, by highly polarizing political discourse. They lacked a unifying core. But the CJP used these highly viral, genuinely funny memes to forge a massive digital network. The cockroach became their shared fantasy theme. It was the transformative power that instantly bridged those deeply entrenched social divides, turning the quiet pain of isolation into this loud, defiant multiplicity operating completely outside of the establishment's control. Section 5. Defending the Secular Constitution. Now, when we impartially analyze the source material, it's clear that behind all the satire and the memes, the CJP advocates for very serious, systemic transparency. Their core demands aren't a joke. They include strict right to information answerability, a complete ban on opaque electoral bonds, stopping judges from taking lucrative state posts after they retire, and launching investigations into corporate media anchors. The movement firmly positions itself as a defender of the secular, democratic ideals of the Indian Constitution, using the playful cover of a cockroach to speak up against policies it views as fundamentally exclusionary or corrupt. And the founder of the CJP, Abhijit Deepge, has made it super clear that this whole thing is moving way beyond the digital realm. It's spilling offline. Young volunteers are actually showing up to physical protests, literally dressed up in giant cockroach costumes, to playfully but very pointedly expose institutional rot. They're dramatizing the message that, hey, cockroaches only show up where there's already decay, essentially holding a massive mirror up to the political system. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought to chew on. You cannot simply banish a society's problems by dehumanizing the actual people who are suffering from them. From a Jungian perspective, when a state attempts to cast its shadow into the dark, that shadow is inevitably going to take form, find a unifying symbol, achieve symbolic convergence, and return. And in this incredibly unique case, the previously disconnected masses returned not to destroy, but to organize and guard the very secular democracy they were accused of infesting. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating explainer. Stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next one.